We turn again to Hebrews 11. I'll pick up the reading at verse 23, and we'll read through to verse 40, the end of the chapter. This morning we're looking at verses 24 through 26 of this chapter. We begin at 23. By faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who was invisible. Through faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, which the Egyptians are saying to do were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. By faith the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, and she had received the spies with peace. And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, and of Samson, and of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. Again, our prayer is that the Lord would give us an understanding of what we read there in his holy and inspired word. Hebrews 11 in verses 24 through 26 is our text. By faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. We read here, by faith Moses, when he was come to years, chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Now, that's an amazing choice. In fact, one might go so far as to say it's an unnatural choice. From a natural point of view, that is, from a point of view absent the grace of God, to choose to suffer affliction makes little or no sense. Who would ever choose to suffer affliction? But that's precisely what Moses did. Confronted with two alternatives, Moses consciously chose to suffer affliction with the people of God. And he chose that rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Moses made that choice when he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He made that choice, the writer to the Hebrews informs us, when he was come to years. Interestingly, Stephen, in the passage that we read last Lord's Day in Acts 7, where he made his defence before the Sanhedrin, Stephen in Acts chapter 7 is more specific about the timing of these things. From Stephen, we actually learn that Moses made this choice when he was 40 years of age. Now, Moses lived to 120 years of age, and so at age 40, he still had 2/3 of his life ahead of him. As a member of the house of Pharaoh, he could have been anything in Egypt, and he could have had everything that his heart could ever have desired. Yet when he was come to years, of maturity, Moses consciously made the choice not to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, but instead he chose to suffer affliction with the people of God. There comes a time in life, really for all of us, employing the language of our text, when we come to years. As we come to years of maturity. I think today, if you were to ask when do we come to years of maturity, we would probably say that we come to years of maturity in our late teens or early 20s. We would say that because that's the time in our lives when we make more and more decisions about our future course of life and the direction of our lives. For young people, it's the transition that takes place over time between their childhood and their adulthood. And it's the time when young adults are making decisions about their vocations, making decisions about their careers, they're making decisions about the future directions of their life, about perhaps even partners for life, making more and more decisions about financial matters. And as was the case with Moses, they're also making decisions about spiritual issues. All of us come to that point in our lives. Issues such as whether we will actually follow Jesus Christ or not arise at such a time in our life. Issues such as whether we will devote our lives to the service of Jesus Christ arise at such a time. Issues as to whether we actually view salvation and the forgiveness of our sins as important arise at such a time in our lives. Prior to coming to that period in our life, often those decisions have actually been made for us. They've been made for us by our parents. Our parents direct us concerning those things. They direct whether we go to church, they direct where we will be educated, they direct often even the friends that we cultivate. And so prior to coming to years of discretion, those decisions have been made for us. But as we come to those years of maturity, when we come to years, those decisions fall more and more to be determined by us. And like Moses, as we come to years, each of us has set before us a choice Certainly we have a choice set before us as regards spiritual things. And the choice is stark. We can choose to enjoy the pleasures of this world, and in the language of our text we can embrace the treasures of Egypt and the riches of Egypt. Or alternatively, we can choose to suffer affliction with the people of God. That's the Christian life. Christian life is a life of affliction. And so we can choose either to throw our lot in with the world, with the pleasures and the riches of this world, or we can choose to throw our lot in with the people of God and the affliction that comes with that. The question, of course, is what choice will we make? Or if we've already come to years, we ought to consider what choice have we made. What should not be overlooked is that the choice that we make carries with it eternal implications and consequences. So we'll look at that under this theme, the choice of faith, and we'll do it in the context of the life of Moses. So the choice of faith, and we'll ask three questions of this passage of the Word of God. What did Moses choose? Secondly, why? Why did he make such a choice? And then thirdly, how? How was he enabled to make such a choice? Now, as you've listened to the introduction, you may wonder to yourself, is it actually appropriate as a Reformed Christian to speak about making a choice in terms of spiritual matters? Is it appropriate to talk about making a choice in terms of our service of Jesus Christ, of serving him? As is plain from our text, Moses, when he came to years, had a choice as to whether he would enjoy the pleasures of this world and the treasures of Egypt, or whether he would suffer affliction with the people of God. And the choice before him was whether he would embrace the pleasures and the riches and enjoyments of this world, or that he would align himself with the despised children of Israel, who at that time were actually suffering on account of their slavery in Egypt. Sometimes as Reformed Christians, when we hear others speak about the need to choose or to make a choice for the things of God or the things of Jesus Christ, we have a tendency to feel somewhat uneasy. And the reason for that is because as Reformed believers, we are rightly conscious that the Bible teaches that men do not choose God, rather God chooses them. We don't choose Jesus Christ, but Jesus Christ chooses us. In other words, we recognise that men and women are not saved as a result of a conscious decision or determination on their part to seek after God and after the salvation that is to be found in Jesus Christ. That's not how we are saved. We are actually familiar and we take seriously the words of Jesus Christ in John 15 and verse 16, where he says, "Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you." We rightly maintain that our salvation from beginning to end is all of God. God chooses us. We do not, indeed, we cannot choose him. As a result of the fall, we acknowledge that all mankind, and that includes ourselves here this morning, we became dead in sin and wholly defiled in all the faculties and parts of soul and body. Hence, by nature, that is apart from the work of God's grace in our hearts, we are unable to seek after God or to choose to pursue salvation in Jesus Christ. Indeed, we have no desire or inclination to do either of those things. We are spiritually dead. However, while acknowledging those truths, we should not lose sight of the fact that the Bible also speaks plainly about men and women making choice about spiritual things. For example, in Deuteronomy 30 and verse 19, Moses spoke about the choice that was set before the children of Israel when they entered into the promised land. The choice that confronted the children of Israel at that time was the choice between the blessing of God and the curse of God. The choice was between life and death. So that you read there in Deuteronomy 30:19, he says, Moses says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that thou and thy seed may live. That was the choice. That was a plain choice that was set before the children of Israel upon their entrance into the promised land. Furthermore, in the well-known verse in Joshua 24 and verse 15, Joshua refers to a spiritual choice that the children of Israel had to make. There you read, Joshua says, and if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me, says Joshua, and my house, we will serve the Lord. That was the choice that was set before the children of Israel. That was the choice that was set before Joshua. So, brethren, without any reticence or embarrassment, we find here in Hebrews 11 that the writer to the Hebrews also speaks of the choice made by Moses. Just listen again to our text. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Notice this, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God. When Moses came to years, he made a choice. He made a conscious decision. He weighed two alternatives, two possibilities, two ways of life. And having done so, he chose to follow one of those two alternatives that was set before him. The Reformed believers' rejection of the erroneous teaching that men, notwithstanding the fall, are able to choose that which is good, that is, that they can choose for Jesus Christ and thereby contribute to their own salvation, is absolutely necessary. We must maintain that position. The contention that men can choose for Jesus Christ and thereby contribute to their own salvation is heretical, and it's a denial of sovereign particular grace. But the Reformed believers' rejection of those falsehoods must not result in a failure to acknowledge the importance of believers making choice about spiritual things. Brethren, you and I make choice about spiritual things. Indeed, we make choice about such things on a daily basis. In particular, we need to be careful that our concern over this area does not lead to us not emphasising that when we come to years, when our covenant youth come to years, that they also are confronted by a choice about spiritual things. How many of us have faced that choice? There are those, though, there are covenant youth in the congregation who are arriving at that place. This is the choice. This is the choice that many of you are making or about to make or soon may. Scripture here in the life of Moses sets forth the choice that is set before every covenant child. When the children of the covenant come to years, they are faced with two choices. And the fundamental question that confronts not only our covenant youth, but in fact confronts all of us, is which of the two choices will we choose? Will we, with Moses, choose to suffer affliction with the people of God? Or will we choose to pursue the treasures and pleasures of Egypt? These are the two choices, and the two choices boil down essentially to this: will we serve God, or will we serve ourselves? Will we sacrifice our lives in the service of Jesus Christ and seek his salvation, or will we seek to attain for ourselves the pleasures and the riches of this world? They're the two choices that God sets before us. And these were the alternatives, really, that were set before Moses. Moses, though the son of Jewish parents, and we saw something of that recently, he was the son of Amram and Jochebed. Because of what took place at the time of his birth that we read of in Exodus chapter 2, he could have been called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. In the marvellous providence of God, Moses' life was spared, and he was discovered in the basket in the Nile by Pharaoh's daughter, and she had compassion upon him. And through the shrewdness and ingenuity of Miriam, the opportunity arose for Moses to be nursed by his own mother. But it also meant that as he matured, he also had a place in the house of the Pharaoh. Indeed, he was treated as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. As the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, Moses enjoyed all the rights and privileges of a member of Pharaoh's household. He occupied a position of honour and authority. He had a name in Egypt. Furthermore, he was instructed in the learning and the wisdom of Egypt. He had access to and enjoyed the riches and opulence of Egypt. Inherent in his position as the son of Pharaoh's daughter was the possibility that one day Moses might have ascended even to the kingship of Egypt. And as the son of Pharaoh's daughter, there lay open to Moses all of the treasures and pleasures of Egypt, not only the material riches, but also all of the sensual pleasures that Egypt had to offer. And Moses could have enjoyed all of those things. As the son of Pharaoh's daughter, nothing would have been denied him. He could have lived a life of opulence, of wealth, and of ease. And from a natural perspective, such a life, no doubt, would have proved to have been very attractive. And Moses could have had that life. And such a life was actually laid out really before him when he came to years. But that was not the only option set before Moses when he came to years. There was another alternative, another choice, a seemingly less attractive choice. That choice was vastly different, and from a natural perspective, far less attractive. The alternative was to suffer affliction with the people of God. Moses could have abandoned his place in the family of Pharaoh and aligned himself with the children of Israel. But why would he do that? Yes, he was a Jew by birth, but such a choice would inevitably have led to a life of hardship and suffering, a life of servitude, a life far removed from the pleasures and treasures of Egypt. What it would mean to align himself with the children of Israel was well understood by Moses. He'd observed that life firsthand. He knew what it was to be a slave in Egypt. He'd seen how the children of Israel were abused and mistreated. He was familiar with their suffering. He knew the hatred that the Egyptians harboured toward the children of Israel. He'd seen the rigour of the work that was imposed upon them, the unreasonable expectations that they were required to meet. He'd seen the beatings that they'd endured when they failed to meet those expectations. When Moses came to years, the choice set before him was plain. He could either be and live like the son of Pharaoh's daughter, with all its wealth, honour, glory and pleasure, or he could align himself with his brethren, the afflicted and despised descendants of Jacob. That was the choice that Moses had before him. And brethren, this is essentially the choice that all of us face in life. But it is particularly the choice faced by our covenant youth when they come to years. The question is, which way will I choose? Will I choose to suffer affliction with the people of God, or will I choose to enjoy the treasures of Egypt and the pleasures of sin for a season? And that's a real choice. This is an issue that confronts not only covenant youth, but it's an issue that really confronts every believer. In a way, it's an issue that confronts every believer every day of their life. For example, we are confronted by that issue in terms of our work, our vocation. Will we pursue a career or a vocation at the expense of faithfulness to Jesus Christ? It arises in terms of our friendships. Will we choose worldly friendships and relationships at the expense of the service of Jesus Christ? Comes in terms of our entertainment. Will we choose the enjoyment and the entertainment of this world at the expense of the service and the worship of Jesus Christ? The extraordinary thing was that Moses, when he came to years, chose to suffer affliction with the people of God. We're told that he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. In other words, he said no to the power, no to the pleasures, no to the riches of the royal household. He said no to Egypt's treasures, to its wealth, to its culture, to its comfort, to its ease. Moses rejected his place in the family of Pharaoh. He stood aside from his position in Pharaoh's house. He let that all go in order that he might align himself with the children of Israel. And in doing so, he chose affliction. He chose pain and suffering. He chose isolation. He chose difficulty and strife. Now, it should be noted that this was a conscious, considered choice on the part of Moses. It was not a sudden, rash, spur-of-the-moment decision. Moses understood the implications of his choice. Nonetheless, he consciously and deliberately identified himself with his brethren, with the children of Israel, and with the Church of God of that day. And no doubt many would stagger at Moses' decision. He had everything that this world could offer before him. Power, prestige, wealth, every imaginable pleasure. And yet staggeringly he gave it all away. And what did he choose in its place? He chose affliction. Affliction with a despised people. He chose to align himself with a people who were enslaved in Egypt. No matter how you look at that choice, it was some choice. It was an astounding choice that Moses made. Why did Moses make such a choice? And perhaps more personally, why would any of us make such a choice? From a natural earthly perspective, such a choice makes little or no sense. However, such a choice makes perfect sense when viewed from a spiritual and eternal perspective. Moses, by choosing to suffer affliction with the people of God, chose to follow Jesus Christ. He chose the benefits and blessings of salvation that flowed from a life in Jesus Christ. Now that's brought out particularly in verse 26, where we read that Moses, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God, we're told, esteemed the reproach of Christ. He esteemed the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. That terminology, the reproach of Christ, refers to the suffering involved in following Jesus Christ. So if you were to insert that into the verse 26, it would be that Moses esteemed the suffering involved in following Jesus Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. When Moses looked out upon the children of Israel, what did he see? He saw the people of God, and he saw in their loins the promises of God. He saw in their loins the anointed of God. And Moses believed the promises of God. He believed the promises of a Messiah. You see, Moses knew that he was a sinner, and he knew that he stood in need of a Saviour. And he looked with confidence. He looked with assurance to the fulfillment of God's promises and of the salvation that was to be found in Jesus Christ. Moses understood that to suffer affliction with the people of God was to suffer for the sake of Jesus Christ. He understood that it was to align himself with Jesus Christ and for the benefits and the blessings that would flow from him. Such suffering, Moses understood had a purpose. And in short, that purpose was salvation. That purpose was so that he might access the benefit and blessings of the salvation to be found in Jesus Christ. Yes, to suffer affliction with the people of God was to align himself with a despised people. But it was to that people to whom God had promised deliverance in and through Jesus Christ. Not just deliverance from the physical bondage and slavery of Egypt. God had promised that, but he promised much, much more than that. God had promised deliverance from something infinitely greater. God had promised to his people deliverance from spiritual bondage and spiritual death. He promised them deliverance from the guilt and the punishment of their sins. Moses knew that the children of Israel were the covenant people of God. He'd been taught that by his parents. And he also knew from what he observed that the physical suffering that he would endure would simply come by aligning himself with the children of Israel. Weighing the two things, the suffering that he would endure in following Christ in comparison to the riches that he would enjoy in Egypt, Moses, we are told, esteemed or considered the reproach of Christ. He considered the sufferings on behalf of Jesus Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. Or to put it this way, all of the riches and pleasures of Egypt, great as they were, when weighed by Moses with what it was to have a life in Jesus Christ, all of those riches and pleasures of Egypt paled into insignificance when compared to the spiritual riches, the everlasting riches to be found in Jesus Christ. See, Moses understood that the riches and pleasures of Egypt were only for a season, only for a time, just as all the pleasures of this world, they're only for a time. We might live a long life, we might live 70, 80, 90 years, but the pleasures of this world soon fade and they soon will disappear. But the riches to be found in Jesus Christ are everlasting, eternal. They have no end. And that's why Moses chose to suffer affliction with the people of God. He chose Christ. He chose to serve Jesus Christ. He chose membership in the Church of God with all of it, all the difficulties and trials. We should not underestimate the difficulties and trials that to choose to align himself with the children of Israel had from Moses. They're real. But he chose membership in the Church of God and among the people of God. He chose, in truth, he chose for an everlasting home in the heavenly Canaan. He chose that notwithstanding the riches and pleasures of this world that he could have had. The writer to the Hebrews confirms that when he continues in verse 26, we read, therefore he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. Moses, we're told, esteemed the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. And here's the reason. For he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. And that word recompense there really means compensation. For he had respect unto the compensation of the reward. You see, Moses looked to the reward. He looked beyond the temporal treasures and pleasures of Egypt. He fixed his eyes firmly on the reward that belonged to those who were willing to suffer for the sake of Jesus Christ. You might like to recall what Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 and verses 10 through 12. There he said, blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. He says, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. There is a reward beyond compare for those who choose to suffer affliction with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. What was that word? What was that reward? I guess if you wanted to put that reward in a word, it would be salvation. It's the forgiveness of sins, reconciliation with God, everlasting friendship and fellowship with the triune God in the beauty and glory of heaven. That's the reward that belongs to those who choose to suffer affliction with the people of God. The reward is to live in the presence of God forevermore, to experience the bliss of heaven. It's the reward of the treasures and pleasures of the new heavens and the new earth, treasures of genuine righteousness, the bliss of perfect peace, treasures that will never fade and which can never be taken from us. It's good to remember what Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 2 verse 9. Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of men the things which God has prepared for them that love him. Moses had his eyes firmly fixed on that reward. And that's why he chose to suffer affliction with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. But then comes the all-important question: how was it possible for Moses to make such a choice? How was it possible to make such a choice when, as we've already noted, that Moses, along with all mankind, as a result of the fall, was actually dead in trespasses and sins? How was it possible for him to choose to suffer affliction with the people of God? How was it possible for him to choose for Jesus Christ and to leave behind the pleasures and riches of Egypt? How could he esteem the suffering involved in following Jesus Christ greater riches than all of those things he could have had in Egypt? How could he have respect unto the recompense of the reward? How could he do that when Jesus Christ had not yet come and when the heavenly reward that he sought had not come to fruition? We might also ask, how have Christians made that same choice down through the ages. And more personally, how can we make such a choice? We too, and by virtue of the fall, are totally depraved. We're dead in trespasses and sins. Left to ourselves, we have no desire after Jesus Christ. We have no desire after spiritual things. How can we make such a choice? Listen again to the opening words of our text. By faith. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. The answers to those questions I posed are all to be found in those first two words of our text. By faith. By faith. Those who teach that men and women can make a choice for God or for Jesus Christ or for salvation do not know the Scriptures, nor do they understand the devastating effect of the fall. Naturally speaking, left to himself, Moses could not, indeed he would not, have made the choice that he did. And the reality is that none of us, left to ourselves, could or would make such a choice. To give up being called the son of Pharaoh's daughter for lifelong suffering and affliction would, from a natural perspective, be unthinkable. But then what we should understand is the Reformed faith does not deny that men make choices. They do. They do. They do refuse to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And they do choose to suffer affliction with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. And they do. Men and women do esteem the reproach of Christ's greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. They do make the choices, the same choices as Moses made. What should be understood is that the Reformed faith's objection is not to the fact that men and women actually make choices, but the objection of the Reformed faith concerns the freedom of man's will to make those choices. The objection is to the teaching that men and women have the ability to make such choices of their own volition and will. The reality is that by nature none of us are capable of choosing to suffer affliction with the people of God and to refuse to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. None of us by nature are able or capable of making such a choice. Our text makes that plain when it declares by faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. How could Moses possibly choose to suffer affliction with the people of God? It was by faith. It was by the mighty spiritual power bestowed upon him by God himself. Faith is not something that you or I naturally possess. It was not something that Moses naturally possessed. Nor is faith something that you or I can generate or even cultivate within ourselves. What is faith? Faith is the gift of God. And by faith, by virtue of the spiritual enablement gifted to him by God, Moses made the choice that he did. God worked faith in the heart of Moses. God enabled Moses to believe the promises of God, to trust in the promises of God, to look for the Christ to come. And through faith he was enabled to see Jesus Christ in the loins of the children of Israel. It was the gift of faith that enabled Moses to see the recompense of the reward. Apart from faith, Moses would never have chosen those things. He couldn't even see those things. It was by faith that Moses was enabled to make the choices as he did. It was by faith, through the inner working of the Spirit of God in his heart, that Moses was enabled to evaluate the alternatives. And faith enabled Moses to evaluate things rightly. And it's faith that enables you and me to evaluate things rightly. What a mistake it would be if we were to choose to align ourselves with the treasures and pleasures of this world and to reject the life of affliction belongs to those who follow after Jesus Christ. That might have an earthly attraction to it, but I tell you, it would be the poorest choice that we could ever make if we were to choose the things of this world opposed to the things of Jesus Christ. Brethren, it's only as we are the recipients of God's gift of faith that we will ever choose to suffer affliction with the people of God. It's only as we are the recipients of the gift of faith that we will ever choose to serve Jesus Christ. Who would ever choose to suffer affliction with the people of God? The answer is only those who are the beneficiaries of the gift of faith. And what that means, brethren, is if you and I are the beneficiaries of the gift of faith, if God has worked in our hearts, if he has granted unto us a living faith, then like Moses, we too will refuse to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And we too will choose to suffer affliction with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. In other words, if we are the beneficiaries of the gift of faith, we will choose for Jesus Christ, and we will devote our lives into his service. And that, brethren, is the hallmark of every believer. Amen.